And the reality is BiteSite, it's an interesting time that we actually don't want to grow. The way I see it is at this stage, what I've seen personally is that it feels a little bit more like AI is just becoming a very useful tool for the people who are doing it already versus enabling people who weren't doing it. There are a lot of different definitions of success, and there are a lot of different paths to success. So, when you're navigating and you're trying to figure things out, I would say listen to the advice.
Hello and welcome to the Auto Intel podcast, the show where we dive deep into the challenges and opportunities shaping the world of engineering and software. Each episode, I will sit down with business leaders, innovators, and decision makers to uncover the strategies, insights, and technologies driving the growth, transformation in today's digital economy. Today, I have Casey Lee from BiteSite Inc. Hi, Casey. How are you? Thank you for
Good.
being on the show.
Thanks, Nishant. Thanks
Good.
for having me.
Casey, why don't we start with about your background and what made you start BiteSite Inc?
Sure. So I currently am a CEO and software engineer, but my background, there's a lot there, but I think the things I'll focus on is that my background has really bounced back and forth a lot between software development and film production or video production. So, I worked for several companies, everything from the Canadian government to a private company of 1,000 people or so, and then I worked for a really small startup that had about 10 people. And throughout all that, I think at some point I decided that career-wise, I wasn't really getting to what I wanted. As a result, what I decided to do is just start my own company. So in 2012, I launched BiteSite, and at the time, I basically just threw everything I had at the wall, every service that I thought I could offer that people might want to pay for. So it was web development, mobile development, graphic design, photography, video production. I threw it all at the wall. And over time, it's kind of evolved into a lot of different things and eventually settling on just custom software. So that's where we are today.
Thank you, Casey. So, in terms of the business, like what sort of uh, clients do you work with, and what sort of offerings do you have for for the audience? Yeah, what sort of things you do?
Sure. So we brand ourselves as a custom software shop. Other people might call it a dev shop. Other people might call it a software agency or a firm or whatever. But basically, we build software for hire. That could be any type of software. We've done web applications, mobile applications, integrations. We've done even a little bit of blockchain and stuff like that. But our bread and butter and our focus and our strength, I guess, really lies within web applications. Web applications is really the biggest thing that we do day to day. And the types of customers we serve, we generally serve small to medium businesses. So no specific industry, no specific vertical, but we do serve a small to medium business, generally in Canada. So that kind of is anywhere from a single person, a solopreneur or a single business owner, all the way up to, companies that are probably in the neighborhood of 50 people in their staff, at most, like nothing really that much bigger than that. So we have dealt with other companies, but that's really the main thing is small to medium business.
So mainly it's the web application side of things, or do you focus mainly on that for the?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So web applications really is the biggest piece, and I really stress the word application when I say web applications. Nishant, you're in tech, so you probably understand this, but some people who are not in software development might not understand the difference between a web application and say like a website. And in fact, when I started the business, I was very clear that we were not a web design shop or website. Websites, I generally tend to think of more static, more informational, whereas web applications really is no different than any other desktop application or mobile application or any productivity tool or something like that. The only difference being that you use the browser as your user interface, right? But really, the reason I bring that up is the type of things that we do. Sometimes they start off as websites. Sometimes they start off as just purely informational, static things, but they usually grow into something that's a bit more workflow oriented or productivity related. Some of our clients kind of run their day-to-day operations and their day-to-day business on web applications that we build.
So, what would you say like your biggest clients are in which industry? You say you work with lots of different. There's no kind of
Sure.
hard things, but yeah, if you had
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, and we're not a big company. We are a small company ourselves, and so our client list is actually pretty small. We've been around, for 13 years or so now. Obviously, we've had a lot of different clients, but our longest, most steady clients, like I said, they're all over the place. We have one client that is in the safety product distribution space. So literally, they sell things for like safety products, like hard hats, steel toe boots, coveralls, gas masks. These kinds of things. So they are a distributor of products in Canada for that kind of stuff. So they're one of our biggest clients. We have another client that is a bakery. They're a bakery in Canada, and our web application helps them manage their production floor for the bakery. So we have things like that. We had one client that was a private residence for university and college students. So just kind of running their again day-to-day operations, like their bookings and their database of students, stuff like that. So those are just some of the clients. We have another client that is a home inspection business, for example. So all over the place, to be honest, in terms of our the industries that they're in.
Right. So do you generally focus only in Canada, or are you looking to go
Yeah,
like to United States?
we generally focus in Canada. We've had one or two clients in the States, and the main reason we focus just in Canada is just literally the paperwork that's involved. If
Right.
you want to do things properly and above board, you have to register for tax accounts in the various states. And even in Canada, for example, even if you have a customer that's out of province, even that requires some extra paperwork. You have to file your sales tax accounts in those other provinces. So there's more to manage basically when you start doing things out of province, out of country. Yeah, exactly. And so as a result, again, us being a very small business and we don't have a big accounting department and all stuff like that. After we had one or two clients in the States, we decided it was just too much work to manage with that. So we decided to just focus mainly in Canada. And even within Canada, we focus mainly in Ontario, the province of Ontario in Canada.
So how do you generally find clients? Like, do they approach you, or do you kind of go and do you have like you through LinkedIn presence or marketing side of things? How do clients approach you?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when we started, the way I got my very first client, like when we started, it was just me. And the way I got my first client is I literally just sent an email to everybody on my contact list. So I typed up an email and I was using like, I told the story many times, but like I was using like Gmail's autocomplete feature. Like, you're in the to field and you hit A and there's a bunch of names that come up. So I hit A, enter, A, enter, A, enter, B, enter, B, enter. And it's
Okay.
basically BCC'd like everybody that's in my contact list. And I basically sent her an email and said, "Hey, I'm open for business. If anybody's looking for a website, if anybody's looking for anything like that, contact me." And a week later, somebody contacted me, and we got our first client. Over the years, it's been a mix of things. We have a web presence. Obviously, we're a web development shop, so we have a public website, and with some really basic SEO, making sure we have a good title and we're a little differentiated. We did get, honestly, probably like 2 or 3 cold incoming sales. So, in other words, people who Googled us, found us, and reached out to us to look for website
Right.
development. We've had maybe like a handful of people reach out to us, but they didn't really work out. But we've had 2 or 3 that have actually worked out. And then the majority of clients otherwise is just through kind of networking and like friends of
Through
clients. And
reference, yeah.
yeah, exactly. So for example, one of our clients, a lot of our clients use other software other than what we build for them, right? So they might have an internal ERP system or an internal accounting system or whatever. A lot of times when we go and build something, one of the biggest asks they usually have is, "Hey, can you integrate to our existing system?" Right? So this is I think a pretty common thing that custom software shops do. Now, in doing that, we've gotten to know other people because I might be talking to their ERP expert, or I might be talking to whatever, like their accountant or whatever, and then those people will have other clients who have similar problems or similar software. So that expands our reach a little bit. I can think of one partner who has been very helpful to us. He was an expert for one of our clients, and he had other clients that he was working for, and he introduced us to those other clients. So there's a lot of that. And then friends and family, and again, networking, LinkedIn, social media. We don't do excuse me, we don't do a lot of social media marketing. We don't do a lot of marketing, period. But
Yeah,
I think that has given us a little bit of presence. People know about us. But I will say it's really rarely led to actual sales.
through LinkedIn, basically anyone coming in
Yeah,
through LinkedIn.
it hasn't really led to actual sales like through LinkedIn and stuff like that. I don't mean it's a bad thing to do, and I don't mean that people shouldn't do it.
Yeah,
It's just us personally, we've never put that much effort into it, so we've never really gotten the return out of social media marketing.
right. So just going from the business side, if you had to say some of your biggest challenges you're facing right now in your industry and what you're seeing, seeing the AI coming into the picture, has that changed the way you work, or is it something has impacted yours, or what challenges do you see right now?
I mean, one thing, so we're a service-based business, and I'm sure generally people know what that means, but if people don't really understand what service-based business means, you're basically you're getting paid per human labor, right? So you work 5 hours, you
Exactly.
get paid 5 hours, right? Unlike product companies who you're charging more for the product to be used or whatever, right? So not to be confused, by the way, with software as a service. That's a completely different business model. But when we talk about service-based businesses like software developers, like plumbers, like lawyers, right? Like, they charge per hour at work. Always a very big challenge in that space is scaling. Scaling is very, very hard to do in the service based business because the only way you can grow is by adding more people, which is very hard to do. um you know s- and the only way you kind of get profit out of that and enough money to grow is increasing your rates and all this stuff like that. It gets very hard to grow in that space, and the more you grow, the more you start adding people to your team that are not even billable, right? Like you might add an assistant, or you might add someone in your accounting department, and you can't bill their time out, so you have to figure out how to grow that. So ever since we started, growing and scaling has always been a challenge, and still to this day is a very tough challenge. So that's kind of unique to the service industry. And not to mention, I think a very, very big challenge for us is getting customers. Getting customers and getting clients is a very big challenge. And the reason it's a really big challenge for us is it's a very big commitment. If you want to go down the custom software road, if you want to get software built for you, it's very expensive, it's very involved, and it's a very long road. And the and the worst part is if it's successful, it just becomes more involved, more expensive, and longer, right? Like if you hire a software company to build you something, and what they build you is actually successful, that just leads to more software needing to be developed, more people needing to be brought on board, more
That's
customers to take on,
true.
stuff like that, right? So that's a big commitment to ask somebody. It's very big to ask somebody, hey, will you pay us to build you something that's potentially going to really eat up a lot of your life? And so sometimes it's even just hard convincing customers that custom software is a road even worth going down, right? So that's a very big challenge as well. You talk about AI. So AI, it's interesting because AI, I think we're at a stage right now where AI could potentially really hurt us.
Do Yeah,
Yeah, and AI is very unique compared to other advances in our industry. But I will say, so far, AI is still at a point, at least for software developers. And I should also mention that I'm not very well versed in AI. I haven't actually used a lot of AI myself, and I'm not actually up to date with AIs. But just anecdotally, based on what I've heard and what I've seen and what I've used,
there are a lot of tools coming in which can do
yeah,
a lot of software, and they can build it. The
definitely.
vibe coding where people are just building websites and software applications just by typing in what they want, right?
Definitely. But here's the thing, like the way I see it, and again, I might be biting my words in the future about this, but the way I see it is at this stage, what I've seen personally is that it feels a little bit more like AI is just becoming a very useful tool for the people who are doing it already versus enabling people who weren't doing it. So let me explain. So let's say today you have no website experience whatsoever. Yes, there are powerful tools out there that you could type in something and say, build me a website, right? And it'll build you a website. But I think at this point, to really drive value out of that, it doesn't really work that well for the people who've never built a website before. What it works really well for are the people who have built websites, and they can type in now build me a website, and it really helps them out. So in other words, like, it really helps out coders right now. I mean, I'm a coder myself. AI really helps me out, and it really helps me do my job faster rather than eliminating my job for otherwise, right? And I'll tell you, I know AI is very different, but this is kind of similar to what happened with things like WordPress and Squarespace and, all these build it yourself website builders, right? The promise of these tools were that you didn't need to hire anybody anymore. You could just build the website yourself. That was the promise. And don't get me
Yeah.
wrong, some people did that. Some people took advantage of that. But the bigger thing that seemed to happen is that people who didn't have time to build a website themselves still didn't have time to build a website themselves. So they still hired somebody to do it. And then that person just used that tool to make their job easier or whatever, right? So that's why when WordPress came out, you had all these shops that popped up that were offering WordPress websites, right? It wasn't that the CEO of a company was now building his own website. It's now that the people he hired were using this tool to help build a website, right? So I think AI is a little bit similar to that right now. Like, I think AI is less about it hasn't hit the stage yet where it's replacing us. It will. It probably will. I shouldn't say it will, but it could very likely will happen. Sorry. But what I think it is right now is it's more a really powerful tool for people who are already doing that job. So if you're a coder, if you're building stuff, the tool is really powerful at helping you do your job faster and do it better. No question about that. But at this point, at least, it's not fully replacing you. I do think some people are using it, but I don't think it's going to replace the entire industry yet. I do think there's the potential in the future for that to happen.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, definitely it's helping people like the software developers, as you said, to enable them to do it faster. That also helps in terms of scaling grow your business. Like if you can take on more jobs, you use AI to, do more work, and it just helps you to, even do the work for different clients. And at the same time, you can do much more work, right? So
Yeah,
that
and
definitely has a potential to, grow your business as well.
Yeah, and that's very true. That's a very good point. And I mean, we've kind of seen that even without AI, right? Like, we use our main framework of choice is Ruby on Rails, and Ruby on Rails already allows you to build stuff a lot faster than you could before Ruby on Rails came about, right? So we definitely experienced that where it's like, oh, now one solo developer can create a full-blown, full-scale, huge app by themselves. They can build many really powerful applications just in a small team, right? That's because the tools are there. So yeah, definitely. That's a very good point. Like, we'll definitely, like, at least at this phase, really helps out in that sense that, you can build things faster, you can build things higher quality, without really needing all the resources that you needed before. You even think about a lot of the way that the internet has gone in the last 20 years with software development. So many companies are just offering services that allow you for $1 a month to do something that used to cost you. It used to be in the past, way back, you would have to hire somebody to run your DevOps and to make sure deployment was smooth and all stuff like that. And now you pay a company like Heroku like $10 a month, and it's like, boom, it handles it all for you. So I feel like AI is like kind of like an evolution of that in terms of like, now you can do things so much easier, just one person or two people or whatever, and build full blown things, right? And that's the thing that we've seen, because our team is very small, and we've built, I'd say very substantial web applications. So
Okay, so in terms of the growth and vision, what's growth strategy, or what do you think where you want to be in the next 6 to 12 months time?
right.
Like where do you see your company going?
So it's interesting, right? Like, Nishan, we had talked about this when we first met, that it's interesting time for BiteSite, because it's a very relevant question that you've asked, and I think it's what everybody asks. Like, how are you going to grow? What's your strategy to grow?
Understood.
How big are you going to get, and everything like that? And the reality is, BiteSite, it's an interesting time that we actually don't want to grow. At least not in the way that people usually think about growth. Like, people usually think about growth in terms of more clients, more revenue, right? And so on, bigger team, all this stuff, right? And I've been trying to grow this company for over 10 years, and at some point I realized that growth is not necessary for success. And obviously that depends how you define success, But the way that I define success right now in my life is very lifestyle based, right? It's like what are my stress levels? How much time do I get to spend with my family? What's my day-to-day job like? Do I enjoy the people I work with and all this stuff like that, right? Is the workflow or work styles of the people I work with compatible with how I like to work, right? That's kind of where I've settled in my life in terms of what success is. And in order for me to achieve that at BiteSite, that actually involved shrinking in a way. Like we had a handful of clients that we were working with regularly that we were happy with, but I realized that when I have 5 clients, I'm stretched in a lot of different directions. I have trouble getting a lot of work done. I feel demotivated. I have 5 different work styles to work with. There's a lot of overhead, and that's the same thing with staff, right? When you're managing more people, you have more overhead, you have more whatever, right? And there are a lot of aspects of that I enjoy, don't get me wrong. Like leading a team I love, and I love working with good people in the team, but sometimes a simpler life brings you a lot more joy, right? And that's kind of how I believe BiteSite should be. So what we've done is actually the opposite of growth. Like I said, we shrank. So we started actually letting clients know that we're no longer ever going to be working with them, in the interest of focusing more. Right? When I can focus on only one major client, I can probably do better work. I have one work style to focus on, one client to focus on. Little things like admin overhead of billing and all that stuff becomes a lot simpler. There's a lot of simplicity in that, and that's kind of my goal in the next 6 to 12 months. So we haven't fully executed what I'm talking about. I've kind of let clients know, and we've worked on transition plans, and we're still working through transition plans. But the idea is 6 to 12 months from now, we are operating with one major client, doing most of our work for them, and maybe a couple of really small clients, but really one main focus, and just seeing how that goes. One of the things I know about making this decision is that I don't know if it's the right decision. It feels right and
Right.
it feels great, but there's a lot of people I've talked to, and they said, you know what, you probably think this now, but maybe 2 years from now you'll want to grow again. And that's very possible. I might want to grow again in the future, but right now I just feel like the simplicity is very welcome. And don't get me wrong, like there is still a plan to keep our revenue up and to grow our revenue, but not in the way of like growing the number of clients and growing the team and stuff like that. It's more about focusing and increasing billable hours and raising rates and things like that. So ultimately, the plan over the next 6 to 12 months is simplify BiteSite's operations, and that means lowering our client list, keeping our team small, streamlining a lot of what we're doing in the name of being less stressed, happier at work, and not being stretched in a bunch of different ways.
Thank you for that, Casey. So, if what one advice would you give to our audience who's listening to how to facing these challenges, and somebody who's starting a new business? What advice would you give?
I think the biggest piece of advice that comes to mind is I would say that if you're an entrepreneur, if you're starting a business, um, you know, you're going to get a lot of advice. A lot of people are going to tell you a lot of different things. And a lot of people are going to tell you that you have to do things a certain way. Like, if you want to grow, you have to do this. Or if you want to scale, you got to cut back on this. You got to do that. And you'll get so many pieces of advice. And the biggest piece of advice that I would give is just know that there are a lot of different definitions of success, and there are a lot of different paths to success. So, when you're navigating and you're trying to figure things out, I would say listen to the advice and don't necessarily think the advice is always right. Like if the advice doesn't make sense to you, or the advice doesn't sit right with you, you don't have to follow it. If there's advice that does sit right with you and rings true with what your beliefs are, then follow that, right? And then a lot of other pieces is just think about giving yourself advice. Like, what do you think sounds right? And if you're wrong, it doesn't matter, because you tried it out and you figured that out yourself, right? I'd say don't be hesitant to think outside the box and think that there are, again, different ways to succeed, and there are different ways to success, and even success itself is defined very differently for different people, right? A lot of people would look at my business and say, oh, that's a failure, you guys have shrunk, you haven't grown that much in revenue over 10 years and stuff like that. And to me, I thought that way a lot of the time, but then I look back and I think about, well, there's actually a lot of success that I got out of that if you look at it a different way. So my biggest piece of advice is just always remember that there are different definitions of success, and there are many, many roads to those definitions of success.
Thank you, Casey. That's all for today. Yeah.
Great. Thanks,
Cheers.
Nishant. Thanks for having me on.